Brad, Mr. Bossman, I did see you here. Where'd he go? All right, so 11:30, it is Friday. To remind everybody, the weekend is approaching and hopefully it's going to be nice weather for you as it is going to be here in Rhode Island. And guess what? This series is coming to an end today, which I'm kind of sad about. Today is our last day for Fierce Conversations. Anybody else sad about us not continuing on? Should we do another series of something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too, Brad. We're going to have to connect about that after.
Sounds good.
So here's a couple of things I want to mention before I give it all over to Brad today. One, I have to thank Brad tremendously for giving his 2 weeks, actually 4 weeks now, of some amazing training and coaching and inspiration. So that's first and foremost. Thank you so much, Brad. It's been absolutely fantastic. And I wanted to give you guys a little reminder of some key speakers coming in the next week and a half to come. Write this down. You're going to want to make sure it's in your calendar. I promise. It's a great lineup. First, today from 2 to 3, Darren Kilson will be talking about how to negotiate through COVID-19. The region has sent out a flyer on that. If you have not received it, I'll put it in the chat box in a little bit. On Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, Jean Rivers is coming on for a quick half-hour discussion on financially being successful during COVID-19, how to set yourself up for success. So make sure you're there. That's at 9:30 a.m. to 10. Don't worry about it. Just get these in your calendar. We'll send you the links, okay? I promise. Here's another one. You ready for this one? Brad, you ready?
Yes.
All right. May 7th. That's a Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11. Diana Kokoska is coming on our region. I am going to be interviewing Diana, and we're really going to be talking about you and your mindset and really how to put this all together. And then the big one. Here's the big one. May 13th, Mo Anderson, the day before Red Day.
Birthday girl.
11. It's her birthday. We're going to show appreciation. We're going to show gratitude, and she's going to give some to you guys. So get those in your calendar. I'm really excited for that. And Brad, thank you for giving me a couple minutes this morning to tell them about that, and take it away.
Of course, of course. Yeah, the train doesn't stop. Just keeps on rolling. We got so much stuff coming to the region. We've got Bold Pivot. If you haven't engaged in that yet, there's still time. That starts on Tuesday. So yeah, we've got so much stuff going on. And I would challenge many of you that it really actually needs to be take a look at the landscape for the next couple of weeks, what's coming up. You can't participate in everything, because if you participated in everything, you'd never get anything done. So pick and choose the things that you're going to do, but really be committed to them, and make sure that you're walking away from each of those things with some action items, right? It doesn't have to be a laundry list of stuff, but walk away from every 30 minutes or hour or a couple hours of training with some action items. And here's my preferred format, and I'll challenge you at the end of this call today to come up with this too. My preferred format walking out of anything is, what will I implement in the next 24 hours? What will I implement in the next 24 hours? What will I implement in the next week? And then lastly, what will I implement in the next 30 days? So it gives me a real short-term, mid-term, long-term implementation process. And what are actions I can take on each of those that gets things moving immediately, gets things moving now. If you at least take the first step while you're still in the space and energy that you were in when you made the commitment, you're significantly more likely to actually live that out. So short term, next 24 hours, next week, next month, what am I committed to doing? And then what are the first steps that I could take right now? Like the second I hop off that Zoom with Diana, I'm looking at my notes and I'm figuring out what those things are, and then I'm taking the first steps. It might be set up a meeting. Maybe it's putting time on my calendar so that I've set aside time to be able to dive into. It could be any number of things, and action's key. So why are we here today? I'll tell you why we're here today, because no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a company, a career, a relationship, or a life. Any single conversation can. Any single conversation can. That's the power we hold in our hands every time we have a conversation with somebody. Every time we have a conversation with somebody. So I want you to be reflecting as we talk today on what are those action items going to be for you. I'm going to ask some of you to share as we review our last principle. Principle number 7 of Fierce Conversations is let silence do the heavy lifting. Let silence do the heavy lifting. The best leaders talk with people, not at them. And that requires silence to happen. That requires contemplation. Now, here's the challenge that we have as Americans. I can't speak for all cultures by any means, but I have seen this universally everywhere I've lived in America and when I've coached people from coast to coast, and quite honestly in Canada too, because I've been able to work with a lot of Canadians. An American characteristic is general discomfort with silence, whether it be in a conversation at home or at work. People are not comfortable with silence, but keep heart. Here's what they're also not comfortable or nervous about: innovation, change, genius. We're not real comfortable with change of any kind. We're not comfortable with silence. We're not comfortable with innovation. And if you look back on your life, I will challenge you to see that those were times where you really grew. So if we're going to dig our heels in and say, nope, not going to do it, not going to innovate, not going to change, I'll keep doing my business just the way I've been doing it, even though the world has changed and we need to be acting differently and blah, blah, blah. You're actually committing to the dying process. When you commit that you're not going to change anymore, that you're not going to embrace something like letting silence do the heavy lifting, we're committing to no longer growing. Well, there's only 2 versions for every living thing on this planet. They're either growing or dying. That's it. There's no standing still. Standing still doesn't happen. The more emotionally loaded the subject, the more silence is required. The more emotionally loaded the subject, the more silence is required. To me, that means that the deeper we're going, the more silence the conversation will experience. There will be pregnant pauses. And here's why. We're going to have those because that's where the thinking happens. That's where new thoughts come from. You are not going to pick up new thoughts while you're blabbering away. That's not where your brain's going to suddenly start lighting up. Your brain lights up with the silence, with the well-placed question and space to contemplate it and space to answer it. That's where some new ideas come from. I'd love to hear from a couple of you. Where in recent time have you experienced that? Asked a question and let the silence do the heavy lifting, and what was the outcome?
Hey, Brad. Charlie Pasewark. So I used to co-own an exhibit design company, and we were constantly designing and redesigning some of the concepts that we came up with. And my business partner and I were very much attuned to silence, because that meant that the customer was thinking about the design we presented, and we would let them think. You know, you're absolutely right. So many people, especially here in the U.S., think that you have to occupy that time with something. And no, you don't. You know, take a step back. Let your customer take a step back. Let them think about it, and then ask the question, you know, whatever the question is that pertains to that moment. But yeah, let them think, because that silence means they're considering what you've presented.
I love it. There's new stuff firing, right? New pathways are being explored in the brain in the silence. It doesn't happen, right, in a conversation where people are over talking each other. In fact, here's a couple of examples when we don't do it. Here's what it looks like when we don't do it. And I find sometimes this can be the most poignant, right? Interrupting by talking over somebody else. Formulating your own response while someone else is still talking, right? While Chuck's talking, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what am I going to say next? What am I going to, like, no. Be there, prepared to be nowhere else. Really listen. Responding quickly with little or no thought, right? Just talking in circles with nothing new emerging. Monopolizing the airspace. I will tell you, for me, that last one is the one that's the most convicting. It's really easy for me to monopolize the airspace. So I'm going to shut my mouth and say, where do you struggle? Somebody come forward and share. Where do you struggle with silence doing the heavy lifting?
Hey, it's Paul Kouri again.
He is?
You really lit my brain up yesterday. And I'm very aware of it. And an example, a few years ago, I went to an open house that a colleague was having, and I was around the corner while a couple walked into the kitchen, and he didn't stop on the whole house. And I just kept staying out of the way and listening, and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. And I learned several years ago, when I'm doing an open house, back in those days when we did them, pre-COVID, I just keep my mouth shut. And I always thought silence meant you don't know anything. But in reality, what you just said, give them time to process. Maybe they don't like the house and they'll leave, and that's, you don't waste all that time. And that is what it is. But until they ask a question, there's really no reason to blabber on about the features of a home. So I've learned that, but I learned it by witnessing someone else doing it that mimicked exactly what I would realize that I was doing.
Yeah, isn't that powerful to see it in someone else? And any trait can be like this, to see it in someone else and realize, oh, that's me. Right? As a parent, as I watch my children mimic me, because that's what we all do as we're growing up, there's some things I wish I could unsee that they've mimicked, right? Like, crud. They did just do what I do. And I don't like that aspect about me. And wouldn't it be nice if I could change it? Yeah, the silence piece, one of the things that helped me close my trap was that quote of, better to be thought of as a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Yeah. Right? And the first time I heard that, I realized, oh, shoot, there's been many times where I have opened my mouth and removed all doubt that I had no idea what I was.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
I'm Uriel. I'm from the Cape. I'm relating this to my past experience, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I worked for Electrolux and I sold vacuum cleaners. And the men in New Bedford, they would have their clinics on a Wednesday, and I would watch them. And one of the key things that they taught us was to zip it. Ask the question, what do you think? Zip. And it's something that, wait to see what they want so you know where to go with it. That's just a sales thing. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I thought I'd offer it.
Yeah, it's a couple of great examples I can give you. A couple of great examples. One on the listing side, I remember back, and this was at the beginning of the last downturn, had a client. We put out a 5-unit, and as many of you know, a 5-unit sometimes can be the most challenging to sell because it's commercial lending, but it's not really scalable like most commercial properties. So it's just beginning to be commercial. $300,000 5-unit, Lewiston, Maine, really good shape. And he was adamant about his price, And every time we talked, he made sure I heard that 300,000 is the number. It's not 300,000 and then what are we going to negotiate? And then we got an offer. And it was a good offer. And if I remember correctly, it was around 276, something like that. I remember it not being a round number. And I remember it being about $20,000 under. So in the ballpark and within the context of that conversation that we'd been having, this was going to be an uphill battle. And as luck would have it, I walked in, sat down in a conference with him, presented the offer, walked through the highlights of it. He didn't say anything. I turned around, I laid the offer in front of him, and I asked him, what do you think? And I shut my mouth. And thank God I did, because a minute, maybe two went by. I mean, it was awkward. And then he finally said, you know, that's a pretty good offer, isn't it? And I said, yeah, I think it is. He grabbed a pen and he signed it. Unchanged, no adjustment, done, under contract. Exactly the opposite of what he had said for months.
Mm-hmm.
If I had preconditioned, massaged, given him, you know, any of that kind of stuff, it wouldn't have happened. It would not have happened. Here's another technique that's coming up that maybe we aren't using today, but I'd be willing to bet in the next 6 months, some of you will be texting me going, I started using that technique, Brad. You have a listing on the market. It doesn't sell quickly. We need to do a price adjustment. There's some resistance from your seller to adjust the price to where you think it should go. So we go on tour. We go take my seller to look at the competition. Take my seller through 3 or 4 really competitive listings with what they're trying to sell. And then after the tour, ask them, with everything that you've seen, what do you think we should price your home at now? Ask that question and then let what do the heavy lifting? Silence. Every time, not some of the time, I want to be really clear on this. Every single time I did this, not only did we get a price reduction, the seller reduced beyond what I was recommending. And they were right.
Yeah.
Only doing that technique and letting silence do the heavy lifting would ever get me there. Sitting at their kitchen table and showing them pictures of MLS printouts would not get the same effect. It wouldn't. So we'd go on tour. A couple other nuggets here, and then I want to get into how are you going to use what we've talked about over the last couple of weeks? What are those action items going to be? Let's make sure that we remember this. Never mistake talking for conversation. Never mistake talking for conversation. Anyone can play the notes. The magic is in the intervals and in the phrasing. One of the things that was a realization for me as a singer early on, because I did a lot of singing as a young person, was there was definitely a gap between what I felt that I could do as a practitioner and what real artists could do. I could mimic almost anybody, but I didn't have my own. There wasn't this, Ella Fitzgerald type of new sound that I produced. I could mimic Ella, I could mimic Broadway singers, I could mimic opera, I could mimic all of it, but my own phrasing, my own space, right? Imagine listening to a symphony, imagine listening to your favorite musicians and having there be zero rests, having there be zero silence, the mood is elevated where there isn't sound, not where there is a wall of sound. So I always find it very interesting that in a book about conversation, one of the most significant takeaways that I want people to have is to not say anything. Ask a question, close your mouth, create space, create security, create a moment where we allow the other person to come in, where we really hear, where we're really actually present. That's where magic happens. That's where any single conversation can.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to use those tools. We've got to use those principles.
He who
So,
talks, he
go
who
ahead,
talks
Steve.
first loses.
Yes, there is some truth in that. Yes, there's some truth in that. So I'd love to hear from a couple of people real quick. What are a couple of things that you're committed to doing now that we're coming to the end of our Fierce Conversations? A couple of commitments. And you can take a moment to write them down if you want. But when you're ready, somebody share, please.
Okay.
Ask the question and shut up.
Yes.
I need to talk less and listen more. Just drives the point home. Spend time in the anxiety of listening and waiting patiently. So to get better results.
It is a very simple way to think about it, and yet a very accurate way to think about it. We have 2 ears, we have 1 mouth. Let's use them proportionately. Use them proportionally. Who's next?
Have the tough conversation.
Say it again.
The tough conversations.
Yeah. So how are you going to take that into action? Can you know what? I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. I want you to write down 3 that you know you need to have. 3 that I know you need to have. And before we run out of time, I want you to share a couple of them. Who's next?
So Brad, the whole concept of having those conversations as opposed to pondering them, and even in the midst of this, there was a conversation I needed to have with an engineer who was not responding to me, and I've got a closing date coming up. And I finally was kind of spoke from the heart in a message, voicemail message, and said, hey, I'm worried about you. I haven't heard from you, and in this environment, I don't really know what that means. So can you just please call me? And, and he did. And he ultimately said, you know what, I'm not interested in the project, but here's someone else you can talk to. So if I had just sat there and thought about it, I would still be thinking about it. So just do it.
Yeah. And such a great way to enter in when you're kind of on radio silence. I've got an agent we've been in conversation with from another company, and same thing going on. And I know his wife works in the restaurant business. You know what I mean? They've got children on the way. I mean, it's a stressful time. And my reach out to him is, are you all right? Are you okay? I'm here to help. How can I help? Right? Couple more, please.
Hi, Brad.
Well, hey, Lee and I are in the same room. We're fighting over you. So go ahead, Lee.
I think I really need to work on and write down, make it a script, and then internalize it, some of these tough questions that we need to ask everybody. And I just need to really get them in my brain so I can ask and then listen. But there are questions out there that we do have to have in terms of pricing listings in this market. And that's what I'm up against. There's a couple listing appointments we're going on, and I know that they were expired, and they probably want a price that is not going to cause it to sell. So
Right.
That's my situation that I'm thinking about.
If you haven't read this, I don't know. Good leaders ask great questions. John Maxwell. Good leaders ask great questions. that's a good one to get the juices going on the question front. And it is a skill that can be honed. It takes time, just like anything else. And it is a skill that can be picked up and honed. I found that just immersing myself in great questions was very helpful. So, because it starts to seep into your regular vernacular. As you internalize them, you just start, and I hear it like, oh wait, that was Diana Kokoska talking. That was Tony DeSella talking. That was Gary Keller talking. That was John Maxwell talking, right? It's coming out of my voice, right? Couple more, and then we gotta wrap us up here.
Hey, Brad, Paul again.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I don't know if anyone else has picked up on it, but I've noticed every response from every person in this call today is following your cadence, your pace, your calmness, including myself. The way I'm speaking now is not the way I was speaking an hour ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to try to slow down and pace and pause and put a lot of space in my sentences, because I think it makes it more valid to the person that's listening.
Well, and it's especially in these formats, it's so challenging to get the message conveyed, right? So I find that people will lean in and listen more if we slow down some and we really articulate those moments, right? Those moments that we really want to underline. And if you listen to a whole conversation, on one of these with me, it usually starts at a much faster pace. And then the deeper we get into the material, yes, the more I will slow down, the more I might actually use the camera, right? There's some physical things that we can do that can create some change, some intensity, right? So yeah. And we want to mirror and match. And when we mirror and match, right? If somebody gets on and they're a fast talker, and I saw Patrick's face here pop up a minute ago, and Patrick's kind of a fast talker because he lives in Boston. So I might start like that with him and then still slow it down. Time for one more.
Brad?
Yes.
Are we there?
Yes.
Quick one. I work for my son at KW, so there's a generational gap, which we certainly discussed many times. That one of the things he says to me is, "Dad, wait, just remember, W-A-I-T." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Why am I talking?"
Oh.
That's an easy way. I just run with that. So I try to say less.
Yes. Wait, why am I talking? I will confess that probably my first 2 years in real estate, I would have that somewhere in every presentation because I'm a frickin' talker. Was it Chuck that we challenged to come up with a couple of conversations?
Yeah, you threw me off. I never go by Chuck.
Oh,
Anyway.
sorry.
That's all right. I always tell people Charlie, never Chuck.
There you go.
So yeah, a couple of conversations. So I have a seller who is singing the blues about his financial situation. He's living with his girlfriend. He's got a house that he's not even living in. And conversation number one is I've had the conversation with him in the past, but now it's getting down to crunch time. So here's an honest conversation for him, and not so much from the standpoint of just selling the house, but how it's going to benefit him and his kids. The other one is, oddly enough, is a buyer who mistakenly I have sort of let drive the boat, and he's not affected by the quarantine or staying at home. He's got the wherewithal to make this purchase. We've taken all the steps. We've gone through the areas, his price range, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I need to take back control of the boat. And that's going to be a straight up conversation. And then the third is an agent that I've been working with sort of sporadically. and just having the conversation of redefining roles, responsibilities, and splits.
Got it. Charles,
So-
thank you.
so I got my work cut out for me.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Take them one at a
And-
time. Prioritize them. Take them one at a time.
Yeah, and on top of that, I'm hitting Bold Pivot next week.
Good man. Good man. I wanted to share my phone number with everybody again. Here it is. If you need anything, right? I mean, this is, if you've been to any of my classes, and I want to convey the same thing on these Zooms. I would love for this to be the beginning of a conversation, not the end of the conversation. I cannot stress to you enough the impact that this material in particular has had on my life. It filters its way through to all relationships that I have, and really can and has changed the trajectory of not only my own life, but hopefully some of the people I've been able to come in contact with. So I want to challenge you to make sure you've got some action items before the end of the day. 1 week, 1 month, 1 day, and take some step that you can take on them to get into action, to get things moving.
Hey, Brad, if I
Jen,
could
this has
end us
been a real pleasure, Jen. Thank you so much for hosting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I've put it on 3 times now. I put a little link to evaluation form of our classes. We know Brad did a wonderful job. We just want to hear from you so we could improve and get better at these Zooms for everybody. So Brad, thank you again. Absolutely phenomenal job. And we'll chat soon. Thank you guys.
Perfect.
Have a great
See you,
weekend.
everybody. Be well.
Thank you.
Safe.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you.